Good day everyone and welcome to this webinar. My name is Martin Sands van Rensburg. I'm one of the consultants here at RIB South Africa. It is my pleasure to present this webinar to you. This webinar will cover some keyboard shortcuts that will enhance your user experience and speed up your use of Candy. I will aim to keep the webinar within the allowed time frame of approximately 60 minutes. And due to the large number of people logged into this webinar, we will not be able to answer any questions during the presentation. However, please submit your questions during the webinar with the provided function on screen. Afterwards, we will collate these questions and send the answers to everyone that registered for the webinar via email. Please note that the webinar will be recorded and you will receive a link to download it. We plan to host the webinar bi-monthly on various Candy topics. Should you not be able to attend the webinar at the given time frame, then please still register for the webinar as you will automatically receive a recorded copy of the webinar. Now, without further delay, let's get started. So the agenda for this webinar is to have a look at mastering macro keystrokes, the various ways of copying and pasting in Candy, document shortcuts, text formatting shortcuts, worksheet shortcuts, toolbar shortcuts, and then lastly, file manager shortcuts. So first we're going to look at mastering macro keystrokes. Now, what are macro keystrokes? Macro keystrokes is a phrase that you might use quite often within Candy that you would like to store so that you can easily reuse it. Now you have 9 macro keystrokes available and they work together with your keyboard number keys 1 to 9. So to use this function, you will press Control and 1 up to 9. Now this function was actually developed before the computer mouse was developed, at the beginning of the Candy application development, to save our users time and speed up their use of the system. So how does this work? So for this, I'm going to use a wastage example. So I'm just going to go to Candy. I'm going to open up this concrete blinding, and you can see that I've applied 15% waste to this concrete blinding item. Now let's say the phrase 15% waste is something that I use quite often. So instead of typing it in, what I could have done when I did it the first time is I could have pressed Control and 1. The system is going to tell me macro key 1 could not be found. Would you like to record it? Now, because this is a keyboard shortcut webinar, I'm not going to click on yes. I'm going to press Y. I'm then going to give this a name. So I'm going to call it waste 15%. I'm then going to press Alt S to start recording. Now I'll say plus 15% waste, and you'll see that it stores the keys that I pressed. Then I press Shift and pause. It will then tell me that it was recorded successfully, and I can press O for OK. Now, whenever I need to do that phrase, so I'm just going to So now whenever I want to use my 15% waste, so I'm just going to remove that, I can just press Control and 1. That will paste the phrase. If you ever want to delete the phrase, let's say you would like to up it to 20% waste, for example, you can just go to System Settings, Macro Keys, and you can click on that item and then click on the little X, or you can just change it to not selected. I'm just going to leave it as is and click on OK. That is then how you use macro keystrokes. Next, we're going to look at various ways of copying and pasting in Candy. So the first two we're going to look at is the Control R and the Control D function. Now, this has always been part of the Candy application, and it actually works anywhere within the application. So what you can do is, let's say I want to copy block A and I want to reuse that to create another block. So what I'll do is I'll start at the first line and I'll start pressing Control R. Now as I press Control R, you'll see the Candy application jumps all the lines up until I get to the last item where I want to stop. I can then go to the end of my build and then start pressing Control D. It will then paste all of that information that I have just recorded using my keyboard shortcuts up till it gets to the last item. Then it will give me a message saying no data on clipboard. And then, for example, all I can just do is change block A to block D, and now I've created another block using that copy paste function. This also works in the worksheet. So if I open up this blinding item again and I press Control R and then Control D, I can copy all those resources and the calculation and paste them underneath, or I could go and paste them on another worksheet. So that is then the Control R and Control D function. We also have then the standard Control C, Control V function. So let's say again I want to copy block A, so I can just select everything I want to copy, press Control C on my keyboard, go down to the end of my build and press Control V, change the description to block E, and now I have copied this section. Another nice functionality with Control C, Control V that you might not be aware of, as it is a new function, it's an enhancement we've quite recently added to the system, is the copy and paste on worksheets. So how this works is, let's say I want to copy this description of this item and paste it as a comment in the worksheet. So I just selected the text and I pressed Control C. I then open up the worksheet and I go to where I want to paste and I press Control V. I'll get a pop-up message asking me, do you want to paste this as a comment? I'll click yes, comment, and then it will paste it as a comment with giving it the clear green identifier as a comment. Now you'll notice if you right click, you won't see that function there. So it only works with Control V. Now another nice thing to know about this is you can actually use it differently to even speed up your pricing a lot more. So let's say you can't remember a resource code. So let's say I want to add this ready mix concrete instead of doing mixed concrete to this worksheet. So I can just select the resource code, press Control C, come back to my worksheet, press Control V. It's going to ask me, do you want to paste the comment? I'll just click on comment, and then it will add that code as a comment 51113. Now the only identifier between a resource and a comment is the one space in front of the worksheet line. So if I go and delete that one space, you can see the crosser line is now in the front of the worksheet, and I press enter, it will add that resource. So now I've added the resource without having to remember the resource code. So that is just a nice additional function that you can use this copy and paste function for, that we've added to the system quite recently. Next, we're going to look at the Control K and the Control J function for copying and pasting. Now, this function is quite nice for adding resources, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a line here, and let's say I want to add 35 MPa ready mix concrete to this job. So what I can do is I can press Control, I can go to the resource code, press Control K. It will copy the line above, and I can simply just go and change the resource number for the next one. Then I can press Control K again. That copies the description, and I can change it to 35 MPa, and then Control K again for the unit. Now, let's say I want to add the group code concrete to both of these items. For that, I can then use Control J, because what Control J does is it copies the line above and goes to the next line, if you saw that difference there. And if I press it again, it will go to the next line again. So Control J is nice if you want to copy something from the line above and go to the next line. Control K is nice if you want to copy the item above but make some changes first before going to the next item. That is then the various ways of copying and pasting in Candy. Next, we're going to look at document shortcuts. So first we have the F10 key, which will allow you to go to page. So I'm just going to go back to my pricing bill here and press F10. It will then open up my page index. I can then use my arrow keys to scroll, and let's say I want to actually create a new page. I can select that, press enter, and it will take me to the very end of my bill and add a new page. If I want to go back to the first page, I can press F10 again, go back and press enter. It will go back to the first page. The next one is F11. So what F11 does is if you have a item selected and you press F11, it will open up the worksheet for that item. Then we have F12, which will calculate. So you'll see the total for my bill at the moment is 5 million. If I press F12, it will go up to 6 million and my calculate button will not identify as red anymore. That means my bill has been calculated. Then we have the Shift F12 or Shift F11. So what that does is if you have a look at the bottom of these two buttons over here, they have arrow keys, meaning that there's additional function behind that. So if I press Shift and then F12, for example, it will open up the additional keys that's under the calculate button. So for example, calculate rates only, heading totals, and I can then select one by pressing enter. The same goes for F11. So if I press Shift and F11, it will be able to switch between opening up your net worksheet, your cost worksheet, or your net and cost worksheet. Right. Then we have the Control F1. So what Control F1 does on any document is it allows you to add and remove columns. So it opens up the add remove columns dialog. You can then scroll through there and add any additional columns that you would like to add to a document. Then we have Control A. That does exactly the same as any other application. It will select all. Control Insert. This is also quite nice. It works anywhere within Candy. So let's say I want to add a new item between these two items. I can press Control Insert to add some lines there, and then I can add the items that I want to add. Control Delete. That will delete a line. So if I go to these blank lines that I've added, I can press Control Delete. If you want to delete an actual bill item, then you'll just get a message asking you if you're sure. I'm just going to press N for no because I don't want to delete that item. Then we have Control F. So this is also available in any document and it opens up the find and replace dialog. Control Shift Spacebar, also quite a nice one. It closes all your headings. Control Spacebar opens up all your headings. Control P opens up your print dialog. Control plus and Control minus will zoom in on your document and it will zoom out. So it will just increase your document font size or decrease your document font size. Control and the home key You're not going to see it now because I am on the first item, but Control and Home will go to the very first item on the very first page of your bill, and Control End will go to the very last item of your bill. So you see there, I press Control End and it will go to the very last line of my bill. Control left and Control right arrow key. What that does is it moves an item up or down. So if I go to an item and I press Control right arrow key, it can move it down. If I press Control left, it can move it up. And this works everywhere in the Candy application except for the resource list. The reason for this is the resource list is driven by the resource code. So your resource code determines the position of an item. But anywhere else in Candy where you want to move an item around, even a worksheet, the Control left, Control right arrow key will move an item around. Right, I'm just going to store this worksheet. Control up or down arrow. So if you go to a heading and you press Control up, it will actually close that heading. And if you press Control down, it will open up that heading. So that's also just a nice and quick way to navigate your bill together with the Control Shift spacebar. That is then all your document shortcuts. Next, we're going to look at text formatting shortcuts. So first one there, we have Control U. That will change the entire item to uppercase. So let's say I just select this description over here and I press Control U. It will change this entire description to uppercase. Then I have Control L, which will change the entire item to lowercase. So if I select this item and I press Control L, it will change the entire item to lowercase. Then we have Control T, which will change the current word to sentence case. So how that works is if I put my cursor on this excavate word and I press Control T, you'll see that excavate will change to sentence case. And I can keep on pressing Control T, and then every single word where the cursor is will change to sentence case. Then we have Control and the Home key. So if I am in edit mode, you can see my cursor is currently there in front of the A. If I press Control and Home, it will go back to the very front of an item. If I press Control and End, it will go to the very end of the item that I am editing. If I press the Insert key, it will move between overstrike and insert mode. So what that means is if I go here to that item, for example, and I press Insert and I start typing test, you will see that instead of adding the word test, it will override that word. And if I press Control Z, it will change it back. That is then the last one, which is undo, but it only works in edit mode. So just so that you take note, if I add the word test here, for example, and I press Control Z, it will remove it, but it only works while I'm editing descriptions. Candy does not have an undo button in the sense of other applications that you might be used to. The undo button is only when you're in edit mode on text. So if I add the word test and I press enter and then press Control Z, it will not remove that word. So the undo button is only available while editing text within the application. The moment that you store that, you go to the next line, that item will be saved, and the only way you can then remove it is by going and removing it like I did just now. That is then your text formatting shortcuts. Next, we're going to look at worksheet shortcuts. So for this, I'm going to start off with the F function keys. So that would be F10 to insert a worksheet, Shift F10, F11, F12, Shift and F12, F8, F9, Control, and F4. So to see what these do, I'm just going to go to the Candy application. I'm going to open up this worksheet that you see here, and I'll start by pressing F10. That will open up a dialog that will allow me then, using the arrow keys, to scroll through all my price codes that I have in this job, or all the price codes that in my master job. If I go to the option that says there, so I can press Alt and M to switch to the M, which is the master source, and I can then use my arrow keys to search through the list and find the item that I might be busy pricing, and then press OK, and that will add that item to this worksheet, or the pricing of that item. If I press Shift, you will see that just like when I showed you on the documents, it will switch between the different mode, which is now not insert worksheet, but insert last worksheet. So that will open insert the last worksheet that I had open into this item. If I select F11, which says complex worksheet, I have to be on a complex worksheet, and I press F11. That will open up that complex worksheet item, so I can drill down into the detail. If I press F12, that will close this worksheet and store it. If I open that up again and I press Shift and F12, it will allow me to select what save mode I would like to select. So let's say save in next worksheet, and I then press F12. It will then open up the next worksheet and cost worksheet because of that setting I changed earlier. So I'm just going to change that back so that it only opens my net worksheet, and I'm just going to go back to this item that I was using earlier to display to you guys what I'm doing. The next is F8 and F9. So what that will do is it will just switch between worksheets. So if I press F9, it will go to the next one, and if I press F8, it will go to the previous one. That's also quite nice to toggle between worksheets. And then lastly, Control and F4 will close the worksheet. That is then all the F key function related on the worksheet. Next, we're going to look at the escape key. So what that does is, if I have a worksheet open and I press escape, it will just go to the previous document, but that worksheet will still be open. Next, we'll look at the Control Tab function. So what that does is, if I go to Candy and I press Control and Tab, it will switch between documents that I have open. So that will bring my resource document to the front. That will bring my pricing bill and my worksheet back to the front. That will bring my resource bill list again to the front. So if you have multiple Candy documents open, the Control tab is a nice way to swap between them. Then Control Z will undo changes, but also only if you're still in edit mode. So if I go and I remove the word waste over here, 15% waste, and I press Control Z, it will add it back. But if I remove the word or the phrase and I press enter, it will be gone. But if I go again and I press Control 1, it will insert my macro key that I stored earlier during this webinar. And that is then another way how you can get that information back if you have removed it and you've saved it. then the undo will not work and you would have to redo it. So just take note of that. Then we have the control insert and the control delete. So that does the same on the worksheets as it does on the document. So if I press control insert, it will add a line, and if I press control delete, it will delete. It will also delete this concrete item if I press control delete now, which I don't want to do, but it will delete it. Then we have control F, which will again open up your find dialog, where you can then search within your worksheet. I'm just going to close that. And then control A, that will change the amounts displayed between rates and amounts. So you can see currently on my worksheets, my amounts are being displayed. So if I press control A, it will change it to rates being displayed, A again, amounts, and so on and so forth. F5 will open up a dialog where you can go to worksheets. So I can open that up and I can select I would like to go to the concrete 20 MPa and foundations, and that will take me to that worksheet. Control P will open up a print dialog for your worksheet, which will allow you then to print your worksheet. The home key and the end key. Now, this is quite nice. Remember I mentioned earlier that if you want to add a comment to a worksheet, you need to be one space out of that worksheet. And if you want to add a resource, you need to be at the very front. Now, sometimes it's a bit difficult, especially on smaller screens, to see if you are at the very front of the worksheet. So what you could do is you can just click anywhere in that line and press the home key, and that will make sure that you are at the very front. Or if I am in the middle of this item and I want to be at the end of that line, I can press the end key and it will take me to the very end of that resource line. That is then the home and the end key. Control G will edit a simple or a complex worksheet. So what that would do is I have a complex worksheet selected and I press Control G. It will allow me to edit the information of that item, and it will be the same if I have a simple resource selected. So I can then change some of the information. The simple resource, I would also be able to change the rate because it's a simple resource. The complex resource, I can only change the level, the unit, the description, the cost codes, etc. Alt left and Alt right arrow keys, as well as Alt up and down arrow key and Alt enter key, is how you navigate your alternative documents. Now, this is very nice if you're pricing an item and you are not sure what your resources are that you're looking for. So I would like to price this 20 MPa concrete in foundations, and I am not sure what the resource codes are, and I want to use my alternative document to price this. So to do that, I'll press the Alt key and press either the left or the right arrow, and that will open up my alternative document. Now you'll see it identifies the document as in yellow. And to navigate this document, I need to hold my Alt key down, and I now use my arrow keys up and down. So I'm looking for resource 515203. So I can press Alt and scroll down until I find it. 515203. There it is, 20 MPa concrete. I can then press Alt Enter, and that will add that item to my resource list without me having to know the code or using drag and drop. It's simply using the keyboard shortcuts. Then I can press Control left arrow key again. That will open up my master alternative document. For that, I'm then looking for 24516. That's a labor item. So I'm just going to press Alt and the up arrow key until I find my 24516. 24516, my placing team. Press Alt and Enter, and that will add my placing team. I can then use Control left arrow key to move my placing team down. And now I can simply go and say I would like to add wastage to this, so I can press Control and 1 to add that macro key that I've stored earlier. And I'm just going to say divide by 25 cubes per day and put an equal sign, and that will then give me my total. So again, Control left arrow, Alt left arrow will open up your master resource list as an alternative document, which you can then navigate using Alt and the up and down arrow keys, and Alt Enter to add items. Alt and right arrow key will open up your job resource list as an alternative document, which you can then navigate using up and down, and Alt and Enter to add items. So I'm just going to close these alternative documents, and that is then the alternative documents. It's quite a nice function if you'd like to use keyboard shortcuts to price. Then we have the Control up arrow key and the Control down arrow key. Now what this does is it actually scrolls your resource list. So let's say you want to add your 20 MPI concrete, but you don't know the code, but you at least know that it starts with 5.1. So you can start by typing in 5.1 and then press Control and the down arrow key, and it will start scrolling through your resource list until you find your 515203. If you go one too far, then the Control up arrow key will go up on your resource list. That is then the Control up and the Control down arrow key. Control left and right arrow key. This will move items up and down, bubble them around on the resource list. I've mentioned this earlier, but just to show that again. Next, we're looking at Toolbar Shortcuts. So this is uses the Alt key and any underlined word in your Candy application. So I'm just going to show you a few. So for example, if I am on my worksheet and I press Alt E, it will open up that edit dialog over there. If I press Alt T, it will open up the tool dialog. If I'm on my bill and I press Alt E, it will open up that, and I can then press Alt V, for example. That will open up the review dialog over there. If I have the view dialog over here open and I press F, it will go to filter. If I press M, it will go to markup. So that is then the toolbar shortcuts. It's Alt and the underlined word, or just the underlined letter. Sorry. Next, we're going to look at my file manager shortcuts. So this is F2 to rename. So if I go to my Candy, back to my Candy, I just need to close my worksheet and go back to Candy, and I press F2. That will open up the job properties, so I can rename the job and make changes to the job properties. If I select a heading and I press F2, I can rename the heading and change the heading level. If I press Control Delete on the job manager, it will ask me, do you want to delete this job? And I can then use the underlined words as shortcuts to then either cancel by pressing C or R to remove to recycle bin. If I press F11 and F12 on the job manager, it will create either a new job, or it will select the job that I have currently selected. If I press escape, it will go back to the company manager, and again, control left and right arrow key can also move items around. So let's say demo job 2 is in the wrong place, so I can press control left arrow key to move it to the correct place again. And also everywhere we have these underlined letters, that toolbar shortcuts that I mentioned earlier, so you can go and play around with them and have a look at them. All right, that is then the end of my live demo. Just as a reminder, we offer training in person or online on various courses. We also offer consulting, user groups and seminars, webinars, which this is one of, product resource and advice, and we also support our software. So please feel free to reach out to us if you need any additional information on this. Also, quite a really nice function in Candy is the Candy Help Center. So if you would like some more information or access to all webinars or anything like that, you can go to Candy, click on Help Center, and that will take you to our Candy webpage where you can find our Help Center. And over here you can access the webinars, additional information, you can search for documents, and find some nice self-help information. Yeah. Then we would like to ask you to keep in touch with us. So if you would like to follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook, please scan these QR codes on screen so that we can keep you updated of the latest news, announcements, upcoming events, etc. I'm sure you can agree that Candy is continuing to be one of the leaders in the estimating and project control section. And thank you for helping us building better together. Thanks a lot for your time. I trust you will find this features useful in your daily use of Candy. And as a reminder, please email your local distributor if you want to know more about these features. We will keep you informed of the next webinar. And another reminder, if you can't join the webinar at the scheduled time, please still register for the webinar, as you will receive a recording to watch it at your own time. Enjoy the rest of your day and see you at the next webinar. Goodbye.